sejarah yang agak yang berwibawa untuk kita menyorot rakaman masyarakat pada waktu sebelum, semasa dan selepas kemerdekaan. Kalau kita tengok dari segi tarikh dia tu, bermula tahun 1951 hinggalah 1969 majalah Qalam ni. Dan yang istimewanya majalah Qalam ni, dia dikarang oleh seorang tokoh, seorang je tokoh, yang dikepalai oleh seorang tokoh, iaitu Syed Abdullah Al-Idrus. Adapun nama pena dia Ahmad Lutfi. DBP ada terbitkan buku tentang biografi beliau yang dikarang oleh Talib Samad. Tanpa membuang masa, saya akan serahkan pengenalan tentang majalah Qalam ni kepada Dr. Tsuboi. Tapi sebelum saya terlupa, majlis ni saya mohon izin kepada pihak DBP akan dipersembahkan dalam bahasa Inggeris, tapi kita buat dalam dua bahasa lah. Boleh bertanya dalam bahasa Melayu juga, tidak ada masalah. Silakan Dr. Tsuboi.
Selamat tengah hari. Pertamanya saya mengucap banyak terima kasih kepada pihak DBP dengan pihak media yang memberi peluang seperti ini. Dan saya presentation kami tentang majalah Qalam dengan sejarah perkembangan masyarakat Melayu. So the next presentation is conducted by English. So now, first of all, I would like a brief introduction about Majalah Qalam and our project of Japan side and classical media. So, as Mr. Shukri briefly introduced, our Japanese side, this is the Kyoto University, the Center for Integrated Area Studies, abbreviated as CIAS, has a joint research project. So firstly, the Kyoto University has set up a joint research project about the Malay and Indonesian magazines research project since 2009, and then we would like to the Malaysian counterparts. So the classical media, as I introduced, so we have set up a collaboration with the Jawi Transliteration Project since 2011. So this is a 5-year or 6-year joint research project. So let me briefly introduce Qalam. So Qalam is a Jawi monthly magazine journal published in Singapore during 1950s and 60s, from the year 1950 until 1969. So this is almost 230 volumes. So why we set up this project is the Professor Yamamoto, who is the professor of CIAS, Kyoto University, collected the almost complete version of the Qalam. So Qalam formerly owned by some institutions such as the NUS or the or something like that. So Professor Yamamoto completed and digitized the contents. So the CIAS has some special branch for information technology and digitization branch. So the Malay periodicals, including Indonesian periodicals, the digitization and construction of the database is one of the big project of the CS. So firstly, the Qalam was digitized and making a database. So the CS homepage has the Qalam database. And then, but however, so the database is not so complete because the contents of the journals are written in Jawi and cannot search by this system. So we are set up a transliteration project. So making Jawi into Roman characters, and then we make enable us to conduct searching for the database. This is the last one is the URL of our database, and now not yet complete, but half of them are inputted into the database. So the next briefly introduce the importance of the Qalam magazine. So Qalam is published in 1950s and 60s. This is a period of flourishing of Malay periodicals during the decolonization and in period of independence. So we named the age of Qalam. Qalam, you know, means a pen. So many periodicals or newspapers appeared, and they make their own insist opinions by their pen. So this is quite typical word or keyword of this age. So the Qalam among these periodicals, quite the Islam-oriented magazine, because so Qalam is firstly Qalam is a Jawi magazine, because in this period many of the periodicals or Malay journals changed later from Jawi into Rumi, but Qalam did not change, so persistent in Jawi. So this is quite Islam-oriented. And then the next is the editor, Edrus, Ahmad Lutfi. He is not purely Malay origin, but Arab descent. And from Indonesia, he came to Singapore and published this journal. So in these elements shows the Qalam is quite Islam-oriented stance. So and then the next one, Southeastern Asian leadership, because the Qalam stressed Islamic ties. So not only limited to Malaya, but also Indonesia and some other surrounding areas. So it's a quite big volume of data for that period. So we have 5 years experience and some international workshop sessions almost every year. This seminar is another joint research project of the Japanese side, CS, and classical media. So that is all. So the next one is Ayumi's presentation and my presentation. So thank you very much.
Selamat petang tuan-tuan dan puan-puan. Saya Mula-mula saya mengucapkan terima kasih kepada DBP dan Klasika Media bagi saya peluang macam ini. Saya baru dapat PhD dalam bidang kajian tentang Malaysia, tapi dan saya berminat dalam perkembangan sistem perundangan Islam di Malaysia. Dan dalam my PhD thesis saya menulis tentang perkembangan sistem perundangan Islam di Singapura pada masa decolonization, sebab pada masa decolonization Singapura dan Malaysia tidak macam sekarang. Singapura adalah salah satu a part of Malaysia in possibility and their actual the history. Dan mungkin semua orang tahu banyak tentang Ahmad Ibrahim, Profesor Ahmad Ibrahim. He was from Singapore. He born in Singapore, and I very interested in Ahmad Ibrahim, what Ahmad Ibrahim did for Malaysian Islamic law system. So I follow his life history and reach it to his place of origin, and so that's why I wrote about the Singapore legal history in my PhD thesis. And in my PhD thesis, Qalam is also a very important position. Qalam, and editor was also a very important position, because the argument about the legal construction, there Qalam played very important role. So in this presentation, I will deal with that dimension. Qalam, Jawi monthly magazine, had been published from the August 1915 to October 1969. It was a period of decolonization and of social and political structure of Malaya and Singapore. Among the issue of social restructuring, issues pertaining to matrimonial relationship, especially the status of women in the marital relationship, had caused active debate. In that period, women's issue has risen because of multiple factors, such as setting up of national political party and women's wing set within that party. And second, increasing women labor and rise of movement for equal payment as well as equal job opportunity between men and women. And third, social disruption of post-war era, which made lives of orphans and deserted women miserable ones. And this had risen the concern for welfare of those people. All these conditions not only led advocacy movement for women's issues proactive, but also resulted to the actual law reforms. In Singapore, the establishment of Sharia court modeling system of states in Malaya, as well as reform ideas of other Muslim countries, was one of the first results of this tide. It is worth noting that for such advocacy movement to attract public attention, the power of printing media was essential. Qalam, evoking attention towards social problems from its own critical vision and reform ideas, formed the core of world of journalism at that time. The founder and editor of Qalam was Said Abdullah bin Hamid al-Edras. Idrus. Sorry. He was an Arab descent Muslim born in Banjarmasin, South Kalimantan in 1911. When he was teenage, he wrote to Seran Azhar, a Malay journal published in Cairo, revealing his critical view on ulamas who adhere to local traditions for their own sake. His reform idea took over Arab reformists of the time like Rashid Rida. Idrus came to Singapore when he was 19 and worked for Warta Malaya Press before Second World War and for Utusan Melayu after the World War. He was in Utusan Melayu only 3 months, and in 1948 he established his own publishing company, Qalam Press. Idrus dealt with social decadence of the period of war and post-war and criticized traditional religious leaders such as ulamas, qadis, and religious teachers in his novels. His outspoken criticism sometimes caused conflict. For example, in his novel Janda, he criticized polygamous marriage and divorce practice of ulamas, and this led Mufti of Johor to ban the buying, reading, using, and writing the novel. Since Idrus was so concerned on marriage and divorce practice of Muslim community in Singapore, it was understandable that he was one who advocated for the institutional reform of Muslim marriages through legislation. In other words, through government effort. This was why he agreed on the establishment of Sharia court by Muslim ordinance in 1957 in Singapore, which set appointment of Sharia court judge who not only make decision on matrimonial conflict of Muslim couples but also supervise qadi's discretion, which had been considered to be too powerful at that time. However, Idrus didn't satisfied with the range and measures of legislative reform. From the reasoning of his criticism and from debates between Idrus and other advocates, this presentation will examine Idrus' position among other advocates and its transition. The protagonists of this debate were Che Zahara, a pioneering Malay women's activist who established the Malay Women's Welfare Organization in 1947, Shirin Foster, a Baha'i woman born in India who set up the Singapore Women's Council, which strongly advocated for the prohibition of polygamous marriage, and Ahmad Ibrahim, born in Singapore to Indian Muslim parents and became a top legal officer in the colonizing period as common law expert. He also was a member of Muslim Advisory Board under the chairmanship of Said Ibrahim Osman Al-Sagof. So, one of the earliest women's activists urged the Muslim family law reform was Che Zahara, who established the Malay Women's Welfare Association in October 1947. Che Zahara criticized Malay customs like easy divorce and child marriage, as these customs led Malay women into financial difficulties until they forced to live immoral lives. She tackled with this issue through various activities, performing educational sketches, establishing women's schools to teach English, Jawi, sewing, and domestic science, advising for marital conflict, and supporting to remarriage for young divorcees. Che Zahara's activities were frequently covered by English press as sophisticated ones, while some of her activities such as procession sketches and sheltering of runaway couples induced severe critiques and attacks from Muslim Advisory Board. Tension between Che Zahara and Muslim Advisory Board reached critical level when Che Zahara supported a bill to ban the marriage of person under 16 years old irrespective of his or her religion in 1950. The bill had been brought to the Legislative Assembly as a reaction to marriage of Nadra, then 13 years old Dutch girl whose custody rights were disputed by her biological parents in Holland and her foster mother, a Malay woman. Nadra was a Muslim name of Maria Hubeldina Heltoch. She was born to a Dutch father and an Eurasian mother in Dutch East Indies in 1937, and in 1942, during the Japanese military invasion, was entrusted to a Malay woman called Amina, who raised Maria in Muslim faith, naming her Nadra. After the Japanese surrender, Amina brought Nadra to her birth village in Terengganu. In 1950, since the Dutch Consul General demanded that Nadra be handed over to her biological parents, Amina brought Nadra to Singapore to settle the dispute. Through the High Court in Singapore, though the High Court in Singapore ordered Nadra to be handed to Dutch parents, in July 1950, the Court of Appeal rescinded the order on the ground of a legal procedural error. Upon receiving the verdict, Amina arranged for Nadra, who was 13 years old at that time, to be married to a Malay Muslim man, Mansur Abadi, a teacher in training from Kelantan. The marriage incited debate because of her age and because of the case, custodial rights case. Nadra's marriage was problematized as child marriage, and Muslim leaders expressed that child marriage was opposed to modern society, while they stood that marriage already took place under the Muslim law should be left untouched. Shortly after, John Laycock, a member of Legislative Council, he was a Eurasian man, began a move to ban the marriage of persons under 16 years old. Che Zahara welcomed this move, but Laycock announced that the bill would be revised not to include Muslims, since the original bill received united opposition from Muslim Advisory Board. Che Zahara held a mass meeting calling for inclusion of Muslims into the application of the bill. Che Zahara also urged to look up the problem faced by Malay young divorcees because of another child marriages. Shirin Foster, who had arrived in Singapore in same year, undertook Che Zahara's deed. The allegation of Che Zahara, however, as well as Shirin Foster, met strong opposition from members of Muslim Advisory Board. The bill submitted was revised that Muslims excluded from its application. Furthermore, the bill itself did not bear fruit due to continued opposition from Muslim members of Legislative Council. On Che Zahara's allegation, Edwards also countered in his essays in Qalam. Edwards argued that in Qalam, in Islam, ability of marriage of girl is determined based on whether she has attained puberty, not by fixed age. But the attitude of Edwards was not simple. He presented his interest on same topic as Che Zahara in criticizing forced marriage. Forced marriage is the marriage of virgin girl solemnized by her guardian without consent of bride. While the orthodox view of Shafi school recognized the right of guardian to do so, Idris condemned the view as baseless in Quran and Hadith of Prophet and tried to conceptualize women's rights in the context of Islam. Idris argued that women and girls, once they attained puberty, were independent from their parents and had the right to consent to marriage. Thus, her guardian's right to marry her out should depend on it. By conceptualizing women's rights, Idris reacted to Che Zahara's allegation, but also tried to counter the course of court procedure which trying to determine Nadra's religion and marital status through custodial argument, not through Nadra's own confession, notwithstanding the fact that she already attained puberty. Idris' critique of forced marriage also went to condemn ulama who had recognized such customs. He stand on forced marriage issue and his conception of women's rights caused criticism from the Mufti of Johor, who argued that Lutfi's idea was deviated from Islam. Idris insisted his view. In the court, Nadra's natural parent claimed that the marriage was invalid since her biological father did not give consent to his daughter's conversion to Islam, and the High Court applied Dutch law on the ground that, legally speaking, Nadra's domicile was Netherlands. As a result, the marriage was deemed invalid, and verdict was handed down declaring that custodial rights of Nadra rested with her natural parents. Seeing emotional ties between Nadra and Amina, the fact that the Nadra herself strongly resisted to separate from Amina, the case attracted broad public interest. This escalated into deep dissatisfaction when Nadra's marriage incited legislative effort to ban similar marriage, and when court issue developed to question her Muslim status and the legality of her marriage. The final verdict instigated Malay riots, resulted in 18 deaths. After the riot, neither Che Zahara nor Muslim Advisory Board slackened their request for Muslim law reform. Che Zahara claimed to check Muslim divorce, as easy divorce was the biggest cause of Muslim divorcees' difficulty, while the Muslim Advisory Board requested the establishment of Muslim court with special jurisdiction to deal with Muslim matrimonial issues along with the law of colony, criticizing Qadis, including the one that solemnized marriage of Nadra, neglecting legal procedure in the administration of Muslim law. At their first point, the Muslim Advisory Board didn't weigh the divorce rate, that they didn't refer to the necessity to check Muslim divorce by establishing the court. This attitude changed once the discourse regarding Muslim divorce trend as problem began to attract public interest. Its leading actor was Shirin Foster, a founding and radical leader of interreligious and interethnic women's body, Singapore Council of Women. As soon as the Singapore Council of Women was founded in April 1952, Foster put up the marital law reform for all Singaporean women. Foster criticized authorities' inaction toward Muslim divorce trend, adopting sensational terminology such as 2 marriages, 1 divorce, or divorce rate here is higher than in Hollywood. Besides this, Singapore Council of Women drafted monogamous bill as Foster thought that polygamous marriage symbolically present unequal status of women. Up to December 1953, Singapore Council of Women drafted a bill to ban polygamous marriage and sent it to colonial authorities, members of Legislative Council, and representative bodies of ethnic and religious communities such as Christian Advisory Board, Chinese Advisory Board, Hindu Advisory Board, as well as Muslim Advisory Board. In their in their letter, Singapore Council of Women claimed that monogamy was the only way to relieve misery and unhappiness condition of married women. But Muslim Advisory Board opposed to the view and that their claim was against Muslim law and unacceptable to both Muslim men and women. Not only Muslim Advisory Board challenged Singapore Councils of Women's view, Che Zahara, a founding member and once a vice president of Singapore Council of Women, but soon withdrew from her post, opposed to the Foster's plan to apply the one-man, one-wife bill to all the marriages, including Muslims. Che Zahara denied the relevance of polygamy and high rate of divorce among the Malay Muslim, and commented that Muslim law sanctioned the polygamous marriage. Around nearly the same phase, arguments of Che Zahara and the Muslim Advisory Board getting close in urging to setting up of Muslim court to deal with divorce. The Secretary General of Muslim Advisory Board clearly connected two issues when he stated to the press that there is nothing wrong with our divorce laws, but we certainly do need better machinery to administer them. Edrus also took this opportunity to welcome the move to set up Sharia court. He goes on to argue that administration of Muslim marriage and divorce laws is a public matter and that government should bear the expenses of setting up and running courts. Behind such argument was the fact that Muslim community had sought for many years to set up appeal institution for Qadis. The Muslim Advisory Board pointed Qadis as the main cause for the high divorce occurrence. In the Legislative Council, Ahmad Ibrahim appealed the necessity to have Qadis court since at present matters of Muslim marriage and divorce are dealt with by individual Qadis who are to a large extent unfettered by any control or rules. He also pointed that Qadis in Singapore had in fact a free hand in solemnization of marriage, and that the case with which divorces were granted by Qadis in the past has been principal defect of administration of Muslim law in Singapore. By asserting high divorce rate as problem, the Muslim Advisory Board adopted the position of Che Zahara. The time was ripe. Problematic recognition for Muslim divorce has established through high coverage of press, and this gives the colonial authority to ground establish the Muslim court. By the Muslim Ordinance of 1957, Sharia court has set up first in history of Singapore, and it administered the stricter divorce procedures embedded in Muslim Ordinance. Foster's claim to ban the bigamous marriage or polygamous marriage, on the other hand, received support from People's Action Party government, and in September 1961, it bear fruit as a provision in the Women's Charter. For Edrus, it took not so long to abandon his supportive attitude toward Muslim ordinance, seeing that Muslim ordinance imposed substantial restriction on divorce. He sought the repeal of such laws. The dissatisfaction with a set of legislation first appeared in a discussion opposing administration of Islamic law bill in 1960. Edrus argued that the necessity of petitioning the Sharia court to register divorce was tantamount to being unable to divorce, which goes against Islamic law. He further criticized the legislation as contradicting Islamic law. Then, what is Edwards' position on divorce problem? He didn't advocate for suppression of divorce. Rather, he was putting emphasis on legalizing the husband's obligation to provide for his dependents. Edwards repeated the same point that such reform would improve the lot of mothers in society and prevent harm to the weaker sex. There was no significant difference between Edwards and Ahmad Ibrahim on the issue of divorce and economic and social difficulty of divorced women. And on the other hand, there was a gap between them over measures to address those problems. Edwards was reluctant to change the rights of husband, but attempting to solve problems related to divorce by strengthened obligations and responsibilities of husband, such as providing for dependent. By contrast, Ahmad Ibrahim claimed that restricting the power of divorce would benefit the Muslim community in Singapore. Ahmad Ibrahim also broached the subject of legal reform in Arab countries, Indonesia and Malaysia, and positioned Singapore's reform as part of the tide of reform in these countries. By referring to the movements in Arab countries, Ahmad Ibrahim claimed legitimacy for the similarly conceived policies. Responding to criticism that legal reform in Singapore as oppressive toward divorce and polygamous marriage, he argued that in many respects, indeed, the administration of Muslim Law Act in Singapore is moderate and even conservative when compared with similar legislation in other Muslim countries. Edwards complained that since the condition imposed in Edwards also complained that since the conditions imposed in the inquiry were too severe. Edwards complained about the restriction on polygamous marriage also, since the conditions imposed in inquiry were too severe. He said only 3 instances of polygamous marriage that successfully met this condition in 1960. He claimed that although the chief Qadi was charged only with confirming that there were no lawful obstacles according to the law of Sharia, the Qadi actually imposing unwritten requirements such as the capacity of husband to maintain his wife's approval of first wives or approval of second wife's guardian, and more, approval of a second wife herself. According to Edwards, the preliminary inquiry was seen by Muslims as a rule going against Islamic law that was being implemented through stealth. Edwards' criticism on the marriage and divorce rule reached a pitch beginning in January 1961. He came not only argue that repressive administration of divorce and polygamous marriage was against Islamic law, but also criticized the law for being Christian law or an intrusion of women's charter. Ahmad Ibrahim said of women's charter as an exemplary rule of law from the perspective of human rights charter. Give me 3 minutes more. Okay, sorry. He argued that charter's exemption of Muslims from the monogamy rule should be revised, arguing that the women's charter's ban on polygamous marriage was model for modern society. Ahmad Ibrahim cited other Muslim countries like Turkey and Tunisia as countries in which polygamy has in fact been abolished, and added that polygamy has been subject to strict control in many other Muslim countries. His stance was confront of that Edwards, who said of the women's charter had originated in specific religion or ethnicity, such as Christian law or Buddhist law, and therefore denies its applicability to Muslims. Ahmad Ibrahim counters such critiques. While championing legal reform by using the example of other Muslim countries, Ahmad Ibrahim also discussed Muslim welfare in Singapore. For this reason, Edwards' position, which opposed to the preliminary inquiry for polygamous marriage on the ground that Singapore government was interfering with religious faith, comes under fire from Ahmad Ibrahim, who criticized the position for neglecting the benefits of citizens' welfare and for merely proclaiming orthodoxy. Ahmad Ibrahim insisted that core norms of Islamic law like justice and fairness could be realized by introducing modern legal institutions and procedural codes, but not by following orthodoxy. For Ahmad Ibrahim, Islamic law in Singapore was conceived and realized as something compatible with the Women's Charter and as a model for equal rights for men and women. It was also a system akin to the modern judiciary within an administrative framework. It may be that what Ahmad Ibrahim created in pursuing legal equality under the law was not simply an institution for registering marriage and divorce, but modern judicial framework for Muslims. Ahmad Lutfi's attitude toward the legislation was ambiguous. Nevertheless, he criticized certain provisions. He still supports the legislation in principle. Edwards requested that the institution for Islamic law to have enough power to make sure the legal responsibility of man toward his wife or ex-wife. In 1960s, Edwards hardly used the term of women's right expressly. It might be understood that this shows his opposition to the sacred intrusion of women's charter, fearing women's charter, but his repetition of men's obligation on matrimonial relationship could be understood as another approach to materialize women's rights of Islamic conception that is defined through mutual responsibility of husband and wife. That's all. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih kepada Dr. Ayumi. Pembentangan yang sangat menarik tentang data-data sejarah, pandangan-pandangan sejarah mengenai penubuhan mahkamah syariah daripada Singapura. Waktu tu Singapura masih dalam Malaya lagi waktu tempoh tu. Jadi undang-undang tu memberi kesan kepada pembentukan kepada mahkamah syariah seterusnya dalam negara Malaysia selanjutnya selepas itu. Jadi banyak renungan-renungan sejarah yang wajar kita perhalusi dan kita teliti hasil daripada catatan-catatan yang terdapat daripada majalah Qalam. Jadi tanpa membuang masa, saya ingin serahkan kepada pembentangan seterusnya Dr. Tsuboi. Tapi sebelum tu saya ingin memaklumkan kita ada sesi soal jawab, jangan risau. Nanti cuma kita habiskan dengan pembentangan terlebih dahulu. Dipersilakan Dr. Tsuboi.
Second one is my presentation. The title is Everyday Forms of Islamic Practices in Multi-Ethnic Malaya. So this presentation deals with Qalam's article, especially the column Seperti Majalah. Then focus on the Muslim readers' everyday forms of Islamic practices and their interests. So, Seperti Majalah, this is the illustration. So, Q&A corner of the column. So, the column written by the Chimti Al-Farouk. But this is actually the pen name of the column's editor, Edwards. So, this is the corner of the conversation between the Muslim leader and its editor Idris. So the name Seribu Satu Masalah, obviously named after Seribu Satu Malam, indicate the Islamic perspective. So the leaders through questions and Idris answers from the Islamic perspective. So this is many questions, a variety of questions. The theme is very wide. So it reflects everyday interest and practices of the Malay Muslim leaders. So then also it reflects the thoughts of Idris who answers these questions. So this is quite interesting example of the Malay Muslim society during that period. As for readers, each questioner put their name and address with their questions. So actually their names cannot be identified because they are ordinary person, common person, so you cannot pass through. But about address, this is a distribution as the table shows. This is focusing on the first 25 volumes of the Qalam. So 25 Seribu Satu Masalah Kona, and this is about 250 questions. So the questioners, the address are the following. So it shows the most readers, mostly from the southwestern side of the Malaya, Perak, Johor, Selangor, and Singapore, and East Coast, Terengganu and Kelantan as a few, and very few from the Borneo, Sarawak and Brunei, and two from Sham, Patani and Yara. So maybe it reflects the Qalam's leadership. So the Qalam's readers concentrated in the western part of the Malayan states. As contents of the questions, the next the table shows the themes of the questions. Actually, the classification is quite tentative because it's my classification, and the question in many cases questions covers more than one theme. But it shows that everyday, that means personal matters or social matters rather than political or theological or big matters, but not big matters but just small matters. Leaders' everyday concerns about. So it shows the question about relation between the Islamic principle and local practices, so local leaders' everyday practices. So let me introduce some typical questions. So the type of questions, there are some patterns of the questions. Something like apakah hukum or bagaimana hukum. Readers try to ascertain whether their practices or someone's practices have been lawful or justified from the perspective of Islam. So that means ordinary Muslims or common Muslims, not just need their Islamic guidance or Islamic opinions for their own behavior or someone's behavior. For example, these two questions posed by one person in the same volume in the relation between male and female. The former is about the case the husband jokingly touched her own wife. So this is it is allowed or not. So this the answer is no problem. But the latter is the husband have affairs of his wife, imagining a beautiful woman he met. So it is then the answer is unlawful or strictly prohibited. So such kind of the types of questions are typical. Personal behavior or personal practices are the questions from the Islamic perspective. Okay, so from in this example, some based on some themes, classifications. So, sorry. So this table shows some themes, and we start from the above. Religious practices and local customs. This is a quite personal one. Then the next, the marriage, the divorce, and gender. This is the relations between the men and women or some other persons. And the last one is the quite social administration or politics or something like that. Now the first one is personal practices. This one is the prayer, about prayer. So it sometimes posed by the leaders. In Singapore, there is a Friday prayer had conducted. At the same time, the Zuhur prayer is conducted. It is commonly practiced in Singapore. But the answer is that this is not, such a practice had no basis. So this is a contradiction between the local practices and Islamic orthodoxy or original one. So this is the Edros said there is no basis. Another one is zikr. So it is customary that people did zikr when one deceased. So this is regarded as deviation by Edros. But they are widely practiced by Malay Muslims because the question about zikr has 2 or 3 examples. But Edros have very negative answers. And related, this local beliefs, it is commonly questioned that local beliefs are very polytheistic. So for this example is amulet. So questioners questioned the amulets are used by that in the time of the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad, but the answer is no. So this is prohibited. Sorry. For these sentences, it is typical question because something was practiced by prophet or his friends or in the time of the prophet. So this indicated or this expected negative answers because in that type of this. There's no such things in the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So this is emphasized. This is the deviation of the original Islam. So probably the reader also feels that this is the deviation. So then expected some answers from by posing these types of questions. The next one is my local belief. Burying heads of the buffaloes into the ground, praying for good harvest. So these beliefs are also regarded polytheistic. Praying for others than Allah is prohibited by Islam. So such kind of the questions and answers are quite influenced by Islamic reformism during that time. The next about the movie stars, movie actors playing for fire or playing for idols or something like that. So this is these behaviors also criticized and strictly criticized, stating even if actors do such behaviors not their own belief but just for acting, they committed a huge sin for playing idols. From the perspective of faithful Muslims, Edwards stressed that Islamic beliefs must contain internal faith and oral prayer and physical practices altogether. So even if there is a movie, such a behavior cannot be justified. The next topic is, it is related, so Islam and adult customs, especially the adult property of Minangkabau. Whether the, as you know, Minangkabau adult is the matrilineal. So whether the matrilineal inheritance customs are compatible with Islam is a quite big question at that time. Especially Singapore and other Western Malay states had a quite number of Minangkabau descents, especially in Negeri Sembilan. So Edwards, the answer did not completely deny the adult. He insisted the religion is superior to custom, but there is also good customs. Some of them are being adopted into Islam, such as pilgrimage. Those he admits that adult property, Minangkabau adult, is in collision with Islam about their inheritance. But he also stated the system is institutionalized in legal system of nuclear surveillance, so it must be, it indicated it must be respected. So Edwards try to make them compatible. The next theme, the marriage or relation between man and woman or gender problem. As Mitsunari-san, the presentation said, this is a quite big issue about the status of women and marriage. So the question is the number of questions are very large. So the first one, the status of woman. This is about fashion. This is the example is a woman who did makeup, some make eyebrows thinner. So it was quite critical because they had changed their body that is given by God. Similar one is the woman who had hair permed. So this is also invited negative answer from Edwards. He insisted woman covered her outlet for escaping from the men's eyes. So women who had their hair permed was suspected to make them look more beautiful, to show their hair to man. So this is prohibited. Another topic, the marriage. So while there are some general questions such as when women should get married, or whether it is all right for the person to get married with older women, or in the meantime, there are questions about inter-ethnic marriage. This example shows the man adopted a Chinese girl and tried to get married with her when adopted child was grown up. So this is one more example about the adopted Chinese girl and its marriage. So something happened during that society. Maybe it is because this Qalam is this is around early 1950s. So not 10 years passed since the war. So it may be many Chinese families are dispersed as a result of the war. Another example of the inter-ethnic marriage is Muslim and Christians become together, living together, but they practice their own religion separately. But in this case, adults showed little interest. So maybe this is not formally get married in the perspective of Islam. Then divorce is also frequently did. This is a former presentation of this, but many are aware that there were too many divorces among the Malay Muslims, and they had to reduce the number. The example is that husband declared the divorce in a haste, but afterwards he returned to be normal with his wife. So Edwards stated that indiscreet declarations divorce was invalid, but advised readers that marriage should not be so easily declared divorce to their wives. So these relation between the men and women, or the relation between other person, it is in some cases very strict, but in other cases quite flexible answer to the questioners. So the next part is a social question. There are questions about the Malayan society on the whole. For example, the first one is a state. So the whole situation of Singapore, maybe, or Malaya. So the questioner asked whether non-Muslims governed Islam country. The answer is yes. If the government is not its government is not deviate the Islamic law. So it suggests Edo's realistic stance to the colonial country, colonial government. But it also take into consideration that printed media could not openly deny the colonial rule at that time. Islam is also put into the modern administrative institutions. For example, appointment is Qadi is an example of Islamic Qadi administration. Actually, Edrus was critical against Qadi's appointment. It's very arbitrary by a handful of persons. And another example was the management of zakat. He's also critical against the management of zakat because he thought it sometimes neglected Quran. In this example, he criticized the person who stated people who paying income tax would not have to pay the zakat. Edrus thought this kind of management was not transparent and poorly instituted. This one is about politics. Edrus was, in this case, quite negative against nationalism because he thought Islam was not based on the tribal ties. This question suggested maybe that on who tried to open up AMNO for non-Malays, and also this situation about non-Malays demanded equal citizenship as Malays on Malayan society. In one sense, Qalam is a nationalistic against non-Malays, but in other cases stressed religious ties rather than ethnic ties. The economy also sometimes dealt with. Malays thought they are left behind from non-Malays economically, so they were marginalized and had to work for non-Muslims. This question shows if working for non-Muslims or such a job is lawful or not. But Edrus has a positive or approved. A similar example was question whether the Malay waitress were allowed or not. Edrus shows also flexibility. He shows his flexibility as he answered the need to maintain the living, so they justified their job. And the last one is a social problem. So this is a multi-ethnic society or inter-ethnic relations are questioned. This example was about blood transfusion between Muslims and non-Muslims. This suggested that modern medical techniques made Muslims have relations, faced relations with non-Muslims. Others insisted Islam encouraged to save human lives, so it did not lead to corruption of Muslims, even if the blood of non-Muslims were given. Another example, it seems that inter-religious discussion has taken place between Muslims and Christians or Buddhists. So that is the priests and the monks. So, as I stated before, inter-ethnic marriages and child adoption occurred in some cases. That shows the multi-ethnic society of Malays and maybe more fluid relations between the Muslims and non-Muslims than the present time. So in this answer, the editors suggested the Muslims should be explained very detailed, from very detailed for the non-Muslims. Okay, so there is a wide variety of the themes of the questions and editors' answers. So the tentative summary is as follows. So going through the three Pusat Majalah, there is some possibility for social history of Malay Muslims. So the corner reflects interest and practices of ordinary Muslims because they question about their own experience. So it reflects the actual situation of the Muslims during that period. Then the answers, the editor's answer shows his reformist views. It is a very modernistic value. So, but also in some cases, very strict views. But also in other cases, shows their flexibility, especially in relation with other people or social matters. He shows quite flexible during answering the question. So this is the Malay Muslims in the multi-ethnic Malayan society. So questioners try to confirm their Islamic correctness, and the editors advise that their its responses, their behaviors, but this is the context of the coexistence of values and not just radical, but also very realistic one. So it reflects the situation during the time. So Qalam and its contents, Sri Pusat Majalah and other some articles through a light for the understanding the Malay Muslim community during that period. It also helps the understanding or deepening so the researches on the present Islam and Malay community. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih kepada Dr. Tsuboi atas pembentangan yang sangat tentang sejarah-sejarah yang menarik masyarakat Islam pada zaman Qalam tersebutlah. Sebelum saya buka kepada persoalan, saya ingin kongsi juga sedikit tentang majalah Qalam ni. Selain daripada Syed Abdullah Al-Idrus, terdapat juga pengarang-pengarang terkenal yang lain, pengarang dalam Qalam, antaranya Hamka, Zakbar, siapa lagi? Muhammad Natsir. Yang dia tu, Muhammad Natsir tu dipetik daripada majalah daripada Hikmah Jakarta. Dia diterbitkan semula dalam tulisan Jawi majalah Qalam. Jadi memang penulis-penulis dalam majalah Qalam ni antara yang kata yang masyhur lah pada zamannya. Yang kita dapat tengok mungkin pembaca Qalam pada zaman tu pun pembacanya adalah pembaca yang serius kan, majalah yang sangat serius. Dan kalau kita tanya, saya pernah tanya ahli keluarga waris Qalam ni, dia kata setiap kali cetakan setiap bulan tu boleh capai hingga 50,000 cetakan dan dihantar melalui kereta api. Sepanjang stesen tu dia akan edarkan lah majalah Qalam tu. Jadi untuk memanfaatkan sesi yang kita ada masih ada setengah jam lagi, banyak masa lagi boleh tanya. Saya buka kepada persoalan
daripada Klasika Media. Melalui pengalaman saya merumikan majalah Qalam ini, saya melihat satu trend Abu Al-Muta ataupun Idris itu menjawab persoalan-persoalan yang dibangkitkan dalam ruangan 1001 masalah. Dan apa yang saya dapati, cara gaya Abu Al-Muta menjawab tu, awal-awal period tu dia agak ya atau tidak, lebih kurang macam tu. Tetapi dari masa ke semasa, cara dia menjawab itu, dia sertakan pendapat daripada 4 mazhab dan juga disertakan juga rujukan-rujukan yang ilmiah daripada pelbagai sumber. Dan ada satu yang saya ingat, soalan tentang zakat, tetapi disertakan juga jawapannya sejarah tentang zakat, falsafah zakat dan sebagainya. Jadi soalan saya pada pendapat Dr. Tsuboi, adakah cara Abu Al-Muta menjawab itu mengambil kira tahap pemikiran masyarakat di Malaysia ataupun Singapura? Sekian, terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Yes, that's right. It is I didn't introduce, but there is some question about the Islamic history or legal groups or legal schools or something like that. And to that question, the Edrus was answered based on also the understanding of the Islamic history or Islamic law schools. So in the meantime, the question is quite personal one and very social one. So it is I think the Edrus answers from the context of Malaya. So this is quite interesting. So I think the both elements have and Edrus is also basically on the Malayan experience or Malayan context, but just the question particular to the Islamic deep knowledge, he's in that case he answered in such a Islamic perspective, I think.
Soalan saya, majalah Qalam ni boleh tak dicapai secara digital oleh pengguna luar?
Boleh. Ada tadi Dr. Tsuboi letak majalah qalam.kyoto.jp.
Boleh diguna pakai oleh semua orang?
Boleh, dia terbuka.
Ya.
Masalahan rakyat di Singapura berkait dengan nadrah, dan mungkin dalam majalah Qalam ada tidak kemungkinan perbincangan mengapa nadrah tu dibawa ke Singapura dengan tujuan muslihat, kerana undang-undang Islam mungkin di Singapura yang dikuasai ataupun dibentuk oleh penjajah British lebih berpihak kepada kalangan orang barat. Dan jika kes nadrah tu dibicarakan di tanah Melayu, di Melaya, mungkin perkara itu mungkin tidak berlaku. Mungkin ada satu persepsi atau penanggapan yang berlainan, berbeza antara dua keadaan, dua negara gitu. Dua negeri lah. Sebab satu, Singapura di bawah negeri Selat, dan undang-undang Islam di tanah Melayu ketika itu masih lagi dikuasai oleh Raja-Raja Melayu di sini. Boleh kan? Boleh faham kan? Okey.
Yes, this is very difficult problem, but I know there were possibility if Amina did not bring Nadra to Singapore, the case will not end it up like that. There are possibility, some lawyers or scholars saying that like that, and I think so also, because in Singapore at that time, 1950, Singapore was a colony of British, and Islamic law system. Straight. No. In 1950, the Singapore was a colony of Singapore, and Islamic law was not established as within the system of colonial law system. It's difficult to express in English, but I think that was a big experience for Professor Ahmad Ibrahim also, because at that time in Singapore, the Islamic law system was not systematized as modern judiciary. That's one factor why Nadra's custodial right went to natural parent in Holland. And that's why Professor Ahmad Ibrahim wanted to establish Islamic judiciary as modern judiciary in Singapore and also in Malaysia.
Isu yang berkaitan dengan permasalahan Islam, problematic of Islamic di Melayu, tanah Melayu kita. Dan ada sebuah lagi majalah, mungkin Al-Hidayah yang terbit lebih awal, kemungkinan boleh lihat perbezaan tanggapan orang Melayu terhadap isu-isu Islam yang berkait dengan kehidupan sejagat umat Islam itu sendiri. Sebab Al-Hidayah ni rasa di awal 1920-an lah, saya ingat begitu. Jadi kemungkinan ada satu tanggapan yang agak berbeza antara period sebelum pendudukan Jepun dan selepas pendudukan Jepun. Jadi itu satu usaha yang rasa lebih meluas lah, dan lebih untuk perincikan permasalahan isu-isu umat Islam itu sendiri. Dan juga dalam majalah Guru misalnya, majalah Guru, itu juga banyak isu-isu masalah orang Islam sebenarnya.
Thank you very much. So I explained a little bit that why the SIAS choose Qalam to digitize. So the SIAS is special in its database. So no, not specialized in the Islam actually. So the reason to choose Qalam is the length of the publication is very long, so 20 years. So due to the effort of the Professor Yamamoto, the almost complete collection is owned by SIAS. So that is why the SIAS digitize and construct database for the Qalam magazine. So it is true that maybe the comparison with other media is very quite important and necessary. So this is the next step for the researchers to comparing Qalam and other discourses. Another work, I think.
Terima kasih. Pertamanya, bila kita mendengar pembentangan oleh Dr. Tsuboi tadi, apa yang tergambar bagi saya, peranan editor itu cukup besar waktu itu. Malah isu yang kita tangani pada hari ini, padahal waktu itu sudah pun menjadi satu matlamat untuk melahirkan masyarakat yang harmoni. Pertamanya tentang interreligious relationship, kerana sekarang ini Malaysia juga menuju ke arah itu supaya untuk mengurangkan konflik antara antara agama dan bangsa itu. Jadi saya kira ini peranan yang cukup besar yang juga harus dimainkan oleh editor-editor, bukan sekadar untuk menampilkan makalah tetapi juga menangani isu masyarakat. Soalan saya pertamanya, kalau dapat Dr. Tsuboi tadi ada statistik yang ditunjukkan, dan ada satu di bawah kategori others, apa agaknya yang soalan-soalan yang ditimbulkan oleh masyarakat, dan yang keduanya tadi saya tengok ada isu gender yang agak besar juga, ramai juga yang bertanya, dan itu juga saya nak hubung kaitkan dengan kertas Dr. Ayumi, hubungannya oleh kerana banyak pertanyaan, mungkin itulah isu yang sangat besar waktu itu, menangani kedudukan wanita, especially pertaining to the laws of the present system, mungkin customary law ataupun mungkin soal-soal syariah. Jadi soalan itu saya nak lanjutkan sedikit, apakah ada agaknya unsur persamaan ataupun isu-isu itu oleh kerana inadequacy dalam undang-undang menangani masalah wanita yang berlaku semasa situasi Nadrah dan Lina Joy yang juga jadi penyelidikan Dr. Ayumi. So 3 soalan Dr. ini.
Thank you very much. I think it is Edru's characteristic that he's a quite reformist, shows quite reformist view to the Muslim conflict between the Muslims, but they're quite flexible between the relation between the Muslims and non-Muslims, I think. So this is his big characteristic of that. And about the categories, others cannot be classified because a wide range of questions. For example, which one is first, the eggs or chicken or something like that, or where frogs is going when the dry season or something like that. The address answered such kind of questions. So this is cannot so classify. So basically, it's a general question. Other is a general question. And the classification of gender is actually a wide range of the questions. For example, the status of the women I introduced, or the relation between men and women. And so this is quite near to the marriage, but just separate because the issue of the women is quite frequently raised.
Yeah, there are similarities between Nadra's case and Lina Joy's case. The first and the main similarity is both cases are about the jurisdiction of civil law or colonial law system between Islamic law system, and but there are difference. There was still different because in Lina Joy's case, Islamic law is not not like in Nadra's case, because Islamic law is already referred in the constitution as law to be law of Malaysia, law of the land. But in Nadra's case, Islamic law was there, people know, and Muslims say that their marriage under Muslim law, and Nadra was Muslim under Muslim law, but the law system in Singapore did not recognize, actually, I think it did recognize Muslim law, but Nadra, the Nadra's case was not was exceptional, because if Nadra born in Singapore, it was another question. But Nadra did not born in Singapore. Nadra born in Indonesia, ruled under the rule of Holland. So that was a problem in Nadra's case, because Singapore law referring Muslim law as law of the land cannot refer to Nadra, foreign. Because Nadra dealt as foreign citizen in that case. So but the similarity, yes, it induce a sentiment of Muslim people that the case was something like to neglect the law of Muslim.
My question is, from the Japanese perspective of our heritage, multi-ethnic heritage, as seen from the Qalam records, what is your take for this from the eyes of the Japanese?
Yes. So the multi-ethnic issues are quite characteristic, and actually for example, in Japanese history or Japanese studies, there is a ethnic problem. Surely, there is surely the ethnic problem, but it's not a main problem, or more focus on other parts of the field. So it is very new or very stimulating for the Japanese researchers to such kind of problem. So, and Qalam is a very on the one hand, it's a very Islamic and Malay-centered, but also on the other hand, there is a very flexible stance to the multi-ethnic society. It is quite interesting for the Japanese researchers, and it is so. At today's presentation, so everyday practices of the ordinary people is a very should be taken into account to the inter-ethnic relations, I think.
Maybe this is my opinion is very similar to Dr. Tsuboi, but I also it was very impressive that articles in Qalam was sometimes very orthodox, appear to be orthodoxy, and sometimes very radical when they criticize the old school of religious leaders, and sometimes it's also sometimes it's very sometimes that realistic that the realistic appearance is mainly, I think, mainly be found in Sri Pusat Masalah's Qalam, and that's why I was very interested in the in this year the Japanese research group, all of the members dealt with Sri Pusat Masalah Qalam, and they choose the topic within the column. For example, I dealt with marriage and gender, and Tsuboi-san dealt with rather the construction of the column in holistic view, and another one dealt with the question about friendship or family tie or something. And Qalam is useful in historical research because it make comment on the political or social problem of that time, but not at all. Not only that in this field, because Qalam, especially like Sri Pusat Masalah Qalam, and it will be a source of social history, not only a social problem. In the social problem, about the social problem, Edrus say his opinion. There should be the government should do the religious leader should not be do but in Sri Pusat Masalah there are lively persons problems and very daily problem or daily concern appear, so it is very very full of information about the daily lives of the time. So that was and from that dimension we can see how was the life in the multicultural society like Singapore, or multicultural city life in Singapore. So not as Japanese, I think, but not as a scholar to having interested in that age, it was very helpful sources.
Jadi saya beranggapan kita dah ke penghujung sesi diskusi ilmiah kita pada hari ini. Bagi pihak Kelasika Media, kami ingin mengucapkan jutaan terima kasih kepada pihak Dewan Bahasa, terutamanya Puan Kamariah dan Pusat Dokumentasi Melayu kerana sudi menjadi tuan rumah kepada acara kita pada hari ini. Itu juga kepada Dr. Tsuboi dan Dr. Ayumi atas dua pembentangan yang menarik, yang saya dapat simpulkan bahawa majalah Qalam ni adalah salah satu sumber yang masih belum diterokai secara lebih meluas lah, untuk kita lihat pelbagai aspek ataupun dimensi masyarakat kita pada zaman kemerdekaan itu. Jadi mungkin perlu ada lagi pembentangan ataupun kajian yang lebih lanjut mengenai hal ini. InsyaAllah kita akan cuba usahakan. Pada masa yang sama, boleh juga tengok laman web tadi tu saya tunjuk, tapi tak ada internet, majalah qalam.kyoto.jp. Situ semua terbuka, dia akses terbuka. Ada 3 bahasa, bahasa Inggeris, bahasa Melayu dengan bahasa Jepun. Boleh buat search and browse di situ. Kalau ada keyword contohnya macam cari perkataan merdeka, jadi dia akan tunjukkan lah artikel-artikel berkenaan merdeka tu disenaraikan, baik dalam bentuk jawinya ataupun dalam bentuk yang telah dirumikan. Itulah hasil projek kami selama 5 tahun selama ni.